Hi guys, welcome back to Alamat, where we translate and narrate Philippine myths, urban legends, and horror stories to share with the world. Our tale for this week is a submitted story about a girl's experience in her newly rented apartment. This tale is called Haunted Apartment. In the 19th century, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe wrote a tragic play called Goethe's Faust, in which he detailed his encounter with a strange acting black poodle that eventually revealed itself as Mephisto, the devil. Norwina was excited when she recently moved to a new property. She chose to rent it because it is close to her new job as a guest relations officer in one of Quezon Ave's most famous bars. She was establishing her independence, as are many young adults from Generation Y, which was why she moved away from her family. She rented a German-inspired house owned by one of her college friends who married a German national and migrated to Germany. The house was rarely used by her friend who preferred to travel and stay in foreign countries, so it was turned into an apartment. The apartment is a two-story, four-bedroom house with a living room, a kitchen, and two bathrooms. Norwina was allowed to rent the lone room downstairs as the owner did not yet allow the rooms upstairs to be rented. The apartment is surrounded by a fence and the gate is beside an abandoned factory that closed due to the massive layoffs during the pandemic. On its left side is a gasoline station, which is also already closed. This makes the surroundings so quiet at night. Norwina brought with her a standard black poodle named Blackie, which was a gift from her father. She observed that her dog tended initially to avoid the mirror in the living room for some reason. She thought that Blackie was just afraid of its own reflection, but she said to herself that it will soon be accustomed to it. Upon closer inspection, Norwina assumed that the full-body mirror could be an antique furniture from another country because she had not seen anything of the sort anywhere. Aside from her dog's bizarre reaction to the mirror, everything else is great in the house on her first day of staying there. Norwina couldn't believe her luck when her friend agreed that she would lease the property for a very cheap price. Yes, she's basically renting just one room, but since there's no one else in the house, then she practically has it for herself. And because of that thought, she was elated and has high hopes for her future. This expectation proved to be far from the terrifying events that happened. Norwina is a normal-looking girl who's not too bright. She has the affinity to share her political views on social media, which is ironic since she belongs to the church, who practices block voting, thereby removing their members' rights to choose a leader on their own. And when her church's order came on who to vote for, Norwina would immediately make a 90-degree turn to follow and defend her church's choice. Due to this, her friends see her as a hypocrite and don't really want to be associated with her. Some even totally forgot that she's their classmates during their reunions. She knows most of her classmates and friends don't like her. That's why she is always on herself alone when not working and just spends her free time reading graphic novels and Japanese mangas. It was her first night in this house and had been reading graphic novels since the morning. Norwina squinted her tired brown eyes to rest them for a bit. She touched her head with her right arm and proceeded to run it through her curly long dark black hair. Her hair fell on the table, which shimmered from the rays of the small reading lamp on top of the wooden table. It's already past midnight, but she can't stop herself from finishing Junji Ito's manga novel titled Tommy. She looked at the graphic novel and had the urge to flip to the next page. She paused for a second and slowly closed her eyes and sighed. She dropped the manga on the table and slowly stood up to grab a cup of coffee and some of what she considers healthy leftover pizza in the fridge. Her dog, who was sleeping beside her, was awakened by Norina's sudden movements. Norina smiled and tapped Blackie on its head. Blackie crossed his legs and looked at her. For a moment there, Norina saw disgust and contempt in the eyes of the poodle. She shook her head and laughed silently. I must be really tired to be seeing things. She walked towards the kitchen but passed by the full-body mirror beside the sofa. She looked at her reflection, seeing that she still fit despite all the abuse that she subjected herself to during the long nights of reading pleased her. But her brown eyes tell a different story. Clearly, she looked tired, and dark spots were forming below her eyes. She paused for a minute. Norina decided against the midnight snack and just went to sleep. She entered her room, shut the door, and closed the light. Blackie, a cheerful and frolicsome standard poodle, seemingly imitating his owner, looked at the same mirror with his huge, soulful eyes and naughty demeanor. Blackie is about 18 to 19 inches tall. His robust and solid body is well balanced. The dog examined its reflection in the mirror, which reflected his large, dark eyes, pointed nose, and his hair, which was completely brushed and hiding his ears. His face and rear end of the body are clipped, leaving tufts on the hocks and tip of the tail and rosettes on his hips. Blackie appeared to love how his thick curly coat was trimmed, revealing some of his skin at his waist down to his feet, which made him one of the most attractive breeds. After a few minutes, the dog became completely immobile. Blackie fidgeted convulsively, and his hackles began to rise as he growled at his reflection in the mirror. He then trembled, lowered his head, tucked his tail, turned away from the mirror, and cowered in fear. Norina heard her dog and turned on the lights and went to look for Blackie. She found her dog hiding behind the couch. It snarled when she called him. The dog's hackles erected and it gnashed its teeth. Norina was perplexed, as this was the first time her dog showed this fear and aggression. Blackie? What's wrong? Norina exclaimed. It's only me, she added. The dog seemed to come to its senses. The hairs along its back lowered down, and its lush ears demanded to be touched. Blackie faced Norina with his ears held flat back against his head, so that they looked as though they'd almost disappeared. What happened? Norina asked, while touching Blackie's coat. Blackie licked her on the face, and she made some unintelligible sounds to comfort her pet. Norina decided to let Blackie sleep with her on her bed that night. Blackie has never been the same since that night. He went from being a happy dog to becoming more aggressive. He went from being playful to becoming sedentary. Norina made an appointment with a veterinarian to check on Blackie's health. She had no idea that this would turn out to be the worst decision she ever made. Norina got into a series of accidents caused by her dog. Each succeeding accident was worse than before. Before going to the vet, she was pouring some hot water from the electric kettle when the dog bumped her, causing the hot water to spill onto her hand. It was fortunate that she had high pain tolerance, and the minor burn she sustained did not need hospitalization. She thought that Blackie wanted to play with her, and it was a good sign that he's going back to normal. Norina rescheduled the appointment, which was not a wise opinion in retrospect. She ordered some dog treats from an online store in the hopes of improving Blackie's behavior. She also made some peanut butter dog chow and sliced small bits of hot dog for her pet. When the shipment arrived, Norina was surprised to find it had been destroyed by Blackie, and the delivery man had been attacked by Blackie, resulting in minor injuries but huge penalties for Norina. A large sum of money was agreed upon by the delivery company. Norina was getting skeptical of Blackie and terrified of him. Norina occasionally sees Blackie crouching in her closet, looking at her late at night. His eyes flaming and the dog's eyes filled with murder. She knows it's crazy to think this way, but her gut feeling is telling her that something violent will happen if she allows Blackie to sleep in her room. She even began to fear that her pet dog was planning to eat her. Norina shudders at the thought. She had a plan to take Blackie to an animal sanctuary, so she dialed a few numbers. She was told to bring the dog and its papers when she's ready. She looked at the documents of Blackie and tried to call the Paws Animal Shelter she had chosen, but her landline phone had no dial tone. She later found out that the phone loop drop from the network interface device was cut. Blackie chewed the cable off. This also caused her internet connection to go down. She called her internet service provider, but its repair date was scheduled 2 weeks away. When Norina went home from work, she was expecting to rest. But when she went to her room, she got upset with what she saw. Blackie had completely ruined her bed. He chewed on the pillows and beddings, making a mess in the room. Like a child who had done something wrong, the dog hid in the closet. She then heard some strange sounds coming from the room upstairs. She looked at the wall clock and saw that it was 6:15 in the morning, but it was still dark outside. In the fear that her house security was compromised, she carefully went upstairs. She grabbed the pepper spray that she was bringing to work and took small steps going upstairs. She approached the door of the main room and where the noises were coming from. She then put her head closer to the door with her right ear almost touching it. She overheard people whispering. When she listened closely, it seemed like voices were actually chanting in a foreign language. Norina hesitated for a moment and slowly backed away from the door. She paused and looked at the pepper spray in her hand. That's when she decided to confront whoever trespassed on the house. Besides, she could run quickly should any untoward incident happen, she assured herself. She quietly walked toward the door and tried to open the door swiftly. After the touching sound of the doorknob, which turned out to be open, she swung the door and pointed her pepper spray at eye level. There was complete silence. There was no one inside. Norina was perplexed as she was expecting someone to jump out of the room, but she waited for hours and nothing. She called her friend, who was the owner of the house, and the latter mentioned that she needed sleep because she could be hallucinating. Norina also called a vet that day using her mobile phone. The vet mentioned that it's not normal. These dogs are known as intelligent, energetic, and sociable. It's neither territorial nor aggressive, he stated. The vet asked Norina to bring the dog to his clinic, but they arranged the home visit instead. The vet arrived on the scheduled date and tried to call Blackie, but when he was ignored, he asked his assistant to carry the dog for a physical checkup. The assistant was snarled and snapped at, and eventually bit by the dog. The dog also rushed to the veterinarian, seemingly enraged by his presence in the house. Norina continued to yell at Blackie, ordering it to stop. But Blackie just stared at her and also threatened to attack her. My God, the vet gasped in horror while looking at his assistant, who was also terrified of the dog. Poodles are friendly. You may have subjected this dog to a lot of stress. He turned to Norina. Norina was speechless because she didn't know what to say. That's when she noticed that both the veterinarian and the assistant looked at the room on the second floor. It's as if something there caught their attention. The vet's jaw dropped and decided to quickly leave the house. The assistant hurriedly picked up their bag with his weird look directed upstairs. They rushed to the door and dashed to their car. They looked scared. No, scratch that. They looked terrified. All of a sudden, Blackie ran upstairs when the vet and his assistant left. Norina was so confused about what just happened that she did not move for a minute. She was desperately making sense of everything. She was also scared and just decided to lock herself in her room for the time being until she knew what to do. When her mind cleared, she called the vet and asked him why they left without treating her dog. But the vet told her of the weird vibe they had with the house. The vet also referred her to other vets and told her not to contact him again. Before going to work, Norina observed some drops of blood on the floor leading to the stairs. Norina turned on the lights there and followed the drops of blood. She then saw a dead bird in front of the door of the master's bedroom. The bird's head was missing. It was cut into half, revealing the ribs, and the other parts were still missing. She then realized that the poor bird was devoured by the dog. This started happening every night, despite the good amount of dog food that she gives Blackie twice a day. Norina could not believe that her once most beloved pet had turned into this kind of beast. The whispers continued, but later turned into voices of groans and wailing, with loud banging of doors, which now happened during the day when Norina was resting. Since she was working at night, and she needed a great deal of sleep in the morning, she decided that she would get help from the authorities. Norina grabbed her mobile phone and dialed 911, which connected her to the Philippine National Police. She was hesitant to call the helpline, but she somehow realized that she needed help to investigate what was going on in the house. While she was on hold, she noticed the reflection of Blackie in the mirror. It was not a reflection of a dog. She thought that her eyes were just deceiving her, but she was certain that she was seeing a reflection of a demon. In the mirror, she saw a grotesque demon dressed in a 17th century aristocrat look, looking at her intently with the bloodlust smile of a serial killer. This demon stared at her with a wide grin on his lips. Norina fell to the floor as she was so shocked by what she was seeing. On the floor, she backed up crawling as she kept her eyes glued on the mirror until she bumped into a wall. Several agonized faces appeared in the mirror, including an elderly politician, a father, a nun, a pastor, a mother, a child, and finally, a dog. Norina somehow understands that what she was seeing was a 17th century demon that possesses anyone or any beings. That includes her dog, Blackie. Norina realized that she was wrong. Blackie would never hurt her. It was not Blackie who was doing all the bad things she witnessed. She doesn't need a veterinarian or the police. She needed an exorcist. She ran towards the bathroom and locked herself there. She was relieved when she checked her pocket and noticed that her phone was still there. She phoned her church, but no one was willing to help her. She called a co-worker, and she was referred to the Church of Our Lady of Miraculous Medal in Caloocan City. Father Rogi Traje was a former rector there and a known expert on demonology. After several phone calls, Norina finally reached Father Rogi, but he initially declined to help her. But when Norina mentioned some of the words she remembered that she heard from the room, Father Rogi rushed to her house. While waiting for the priest, she was told to burn incense and myrrh, to cleanse her house and bang her pots or pans to scare away the demon, or for it not to come near her. Norina had to be careful in her actions, as she doesn't want the demon dog to notice her plan. Norina carefully took some incense sticks from her cabinet and burned them. It caused some smoke to fill the house. She then followed the prayer that the priest sent her in a text message. No demons are welcome in this place. I command you to leave. This is a place of light and love. This prayer she repeated over and over while banging some pans and pots from her kitchen. She noticed the dog approaching her, its gaze fixed on her, its saliva mixed with blood trickling from its jaws. Its eyes appeared to be ablaze with crimson sulfur. It growled and was ready to devour her when Norina shouted and asked Blackie to remember her. She verbalized to him the time she was walking in the park, the time she read him her favorite manga, and when she cooked him dog treats like hot dogs and peanut butter. The dog seemed to hesitate for a moment. Her voice got through Blackie and her pet remembered. But he seemed to be under the sway of something. A thunderous sound coming from inside the house was heard. As though trying to defend her, the dog ran away from her and hit the wall hard. The dog went unconscious and fell to the floor. Norina realized that Blackie loved her but was manipulated by a demonic entity when the priest rang the doorbell. It was God's benevolence that I am residing in Quezon City, Father Rogi pointed out. He was in his 70s, but his body was still muscular. His wrinkled face and gray hair were the clear signs that he was aging. He was holding a rosary and a brown leather bag. Father, please help, was all Norina could muster before she was overcome by her emotions and cried on the priest's shoulder. The priest consoled her and spoke. Bring me to the demon quickly before it devours us both, Father Rogi said as he scanned the house. Norina wiped her tears and pointed to where the unconscious dog was located. The priest brought a bag which contained the Bible, a red book, holy water, a cross, and some crystals of myrrh and incense. He asked Norina to burn those crystals in a pot. She begged him not to hurt Blackie if possible. We are not dealing with the flesh here, but with a wicked spirit, the priest answered. He then turned to Blackie and sprinkled some holy water on him. He muttered some Latin words to drive the demon away. Blackie woke up and stood up. His long curly coat seemed to be on fire as he approached the priest, ignoring the holy water and his prayers. The dog let out a terrifying howl, warning the priest that he was about to strike. Norina was sobbing as she tried to hug her pet and implored him to stop. She adored her dog and had no fear of being burned. The dog glared at her with malice and threatened to bite her. The priest struck Blackie with a cross that caused a black smoke-like entity to go out of him and went inside the mirror. Father Rogi opened the Bible to Psalm 23 and read it loudly. The dog fell unconscious to the floor. The priest asked for some salt, and he spreaded it towards the mirror and the corners of the house. The mirror shattered into pieces as a thunderous sound emanated from it. They covered their ears until the sound disappeared. The priest explained to Norina that the demon trapped in the mirror was Mephisto, who was trying to collect her soul. He warned her that the demon might come back someday, to fulfill this task. Narina discounted this warning as she was more concerned with her dog at the moment. The dog was sent to the hospital and was diagnosed with parvo and died. Narina was so sad about the death of her dog, and now that she was alone, she got more terrified as she continued to hear some odd noises in the house. She also noticed some strange reflections in the bathroom mirror. So she left the house and moved to an apartment away from the haunted place. What do you guys think of this week's story? I personally think this was a unique one. It had a different format that I'm used to presenting in this channel. But if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this to your friends and family. If you have stories you would want me to narrate, send them over at mralamatph@gmail.com. Salamat guys, and see you in the next one.